Okay, before we move on to the playwrights that we will be covering, the Greek playwrights, I just wanted to point out on the bottom of page 45, I don't think I've done this yet, the 4 qualities that characterize Greek theater. Greek theater was always closely associated with Greek religion. The theater festival of Dionysus. Dionysus is a god, therefore it's closely to religion. Not only that, most of the plays involve some former reference to God, the gods, I should say, not singular God. They were only performed on special occasions. It is thought that some of the plays that won the Festival of Dionysus were only performed that one time. So they are only performed at the festival in Athens, and they were never performed again. We don't know that for a fact, but we're fairly certain of it. Needless to say, they were only performed on very special occasions, very special holidays, which, like the Spring Rites, which is the theater of Dionysus. In Greek theater, it was always competitive. So there was never just theater for the masses without a competition. Now, theater was for the masses, but it wasn't necessarily as a form of entertainment. It was thought of as a competition. And it was always choral. That being, there was always sections of it that had a group, a chorus, chanting the same lines or saying the same lines at the same time. Remember, it was Thespis who stepped out of this chorus and actually stepped forward as an actor, saying, "I am so-and-so, listen to me." And that's all I really wanted to say on that. But now, we're going to go into the authors. The golden age of Greek theater is generally accepted to be from approximately 450 BC to 404 BC. During this time, and actually maybe I should really put it out to about 475 to 404. It is during this time that Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides are the big playwrights, and they're the ones winning the competition more often than anyone else. We know this because there's actually a monument that was found that lists all the winners of the Athens Dionysus Festival. They all were innovators in a way as well. If you look on page 46 at the lower timeline, you can see that their lives overlapped, Aeschylus being the oldest and the first to die, and then Sophocles and Euripides dying almost at the same time. Overlapping in there is Aristophanes. Aristophanes is not considered one of the tragic authors. He's considered one of the comic authors. Anyway, Aeschylus, we know that he first entered the competition in 499 BC, winning it at least 14 times. Each of the tragedies, I'm now on page 48, that we know of, the extant tragedies, won first prize. The big thing that he added to the competition, or to theater in general, is that he added a second actor. When you have a second actor, you now have dialogue. So up to his invention, so to speak, theater was still just people talking to the audience. Now you had actors talking to each other. We know, because we have records of them, that he wrote 81 plays. Only 7 of them have survived. We hope that they're 7 good ones. We don't know for a fact, mind you. They did win the competition. That doesn't necessarily mean they were the best. They were the ones that won. Sophocles then, when Sophocles started entering the competition in 468 BC, he won it at least 24 times, and he became the major competition then to Aeschylus for a short period of time anyway. Sophocles was a major innovator. He added the third actor. Now, with the third actor, the interesting thing is you can have intrigue. So you can have two actors plotting against a third actor. Or you can have actor A telling actor B they're going to gang up against actor C, while actor A is actually together with actor C ganging up on actor B. It adds a whole new level to what theater could be. Sophocles also stabilized the chorus to between 12 and 15 people. Before that, the chorus, we believe, was considerably larger. My guess is he wanted to stabilize it at a smaller number so that there was a greater chance that they would be talented individuals, but I really don't know that for a fact. According to Aristotle, who wrote a book called Poetics, which was really the first book on art, as in art and literature and lots of other subjects, but he credits Sophocles with being the first one who painted scenery. We know that Sophocles wrote 123 plays, and we only have 7 of them. He wrote Antigone, which we will be reading and watching. Sophocles, it's interesting to note, he lived to be almost 90 years old. He died just a little bit short of his 90th birthday. And it's odd because we tend to think of people in olden days not living very long. But Greek society, at this point in time, was very comfortable. They were eating very good food, they were living very good lives, sanitation was clean, they lived good, long, comfortable lives, much like we do. And I don't know, that strikes me as a little strange. Euripides then is the third of the great tragic writers, and he first entered the competition in 455, which is just before Aeschylus died, or excuse me, just after Aeschylus died. He only won 5 first-place prizes, and one of them he won just after he died. But he really changed the subject matter that was put on stage. He questioned whether the gods were good or bad, or whether they were just using us as playthings. He frequently lampooned or sort of parodied other playwrights. He wrote 92 plays, 18 of them have survived, and he didn't add any extra actors, because after 3, it sort of stuck at 3 actors for a long time until much later on. Now, those 3 actors didn't necessarily play the same roles. They played multiple roles. But on stage at any one time, you could have 3 different characters and a chorus. And then one of the characters might go off, change costume and mask, and come back on as somebody else. That's how in plays like Antigone, you can have quite a number of major characters played only by 3 people. It should be noted that at first, the Dionysus Play Festival just had tragic plays, and then shortly after that, it had tragedy and comedy. And every playwright was required to enter both tragedies and comedies. Was required to enter both tragedies and comedies. But then a little bit later on, there was a new type of play called a satyr play. And a satyr play was an extremely bawdy, extremely outrageous, wild, kind of foul performance. Maybe something that you might expect to see on Saturday Night Live when they poke fun at something. And these were added in, and it was a great way for the playwrights to make fun of each other, or make fun of politicians, or make fun of anything in society that they wanted to make fun of. And this is one of the very interesting things, is that throughout the whole golden era of Greek theater, they were allowed to poke fun at the government, at the military, at great citizens, at all this kind of stuff. It was accepted, it was allowed for them to do. In, I believe it's 404 BC, this long-standing war between Athens and Sparta, and if you look back on page 44, you can see that Sparta is one of the cities on what's called the Peloponnese Peninsula. So that little, the peninsula below Greece, and Sparta is there, and then Athens is up on the peninsula that's sticking out of the mainland of Greece. And they were constantly in war with each other, or fighting. There was quite a long-standing, called the Peloponnese Wars. In 404, again, I think that's right, it might be 403. I won't give specific date questions unless I actually tell you specifically that it's going to be on the test. But when Sparta won that war, life in Athens changed somewhat, because Sparta was a absolutely non-frivolous society. They didn't have the kind of relaxed freedoms and good life that the Athenians were used to. So when the Spartans won the war, theater changed, and it became an era when comedy was more important than tragedy. And it also it was a period then where what am I trying to say? Where making fun of the government wasn't quite as what should I say? It wasn't as open, and that usually comes into play, and it will come into play much later in the Roman thing. That when a government is less democratic or less free, making fun of them is not usually allowed, and art tends to go away from that. So, the biggest comic author from that Greek comic era is Aristophanes. Aristophanes overlapped, as I said earlier, Aeschylus and Sophocles in writing. He wasn't thought of very highly in his day, because he took place in such a bizarre new direction that the older established playwrights and the older established citizens thought he was a little less than of quality, I guess one might say. He wrote several very interesting plays, including a play that we're going to see called Women in Power. We'll be watching that the next time we meet together as a class. Mind you, I don't really like the version of the play that we're going to watch, although it's all right. But he wrote a play called Lysistrata, which was really interesting, because it was during the time when the Peloponnese War was still going on. It meant, the wars went on and on and on for a long, long time, but it was near the end of it, and what he suggested was that the women told their men, all right, girls, no more sex until you guys stop fighting. So the women cut the men off until they would give up the war. And this was not a serious idea that he had. He wasn't actually saying that people should do this, but it is a funny idea, and that play has stuck around and is still performed quite often, mostly in colleges today. The period of time that Aristophanes is writing is known as his Old Comedy. Farce, satire, and non-realistic plays. There's a period of time called Middle Comedies that we don't know hardly anything about because we don't have any plays from that period. But there is then a period called New Comedy, which we do know quite a bit about. And New Comedy is the first time that plays turn towards domestic situations. The first time that plays turn towards the concepts of love between man and woman, just as the subject of love. And I know it's a little odd to think about that because most of our art is based on some kind of love story nowadays. But it wasn't back then. Menander is really the main playwright of that period that we know about. And how we know most about these comedies is they were translated and readapted, but translated into Latin by the Romans, and then later on picked up after the European Dark Ages. So in the Middle Ages and later they were picked up by the playwrights and used as examples of how plays should be. It is very clear that Shakespeare had a good knowledge of some of these old Greek plays because he stole the plots of many of his comedies from some of these old Greek plays. He probably didn't know them from Greek, he knew them from Latin. So then the next thing that's in the book really is then the script of Antigone, which you will need to have read here in about a week and a half. I will get back to you on specifics of that later. That pretty much finishes up the Greek theater, and that's it for the week. Thanks.